Welcome to Side Alpha Leadership, a podcast where leaders can share their experiences and discuss what leadership means to them. I'm your host, David Polikoff. Hello, and welcome to this month's edition of Side Alpha Leadership. This should air in April. I'm your host, David Polikoff, and I'm happy to have, once again, Dave Braun. He's been on the show before last year. Dave's got a really good, interesting story. Last month, I took this show in a different direction. I actually talked to my old guitar player for my band, so you kind of got a little peek of what my past was like. And there were some overtones of leadership, but it was more of a fun podcast. This podcast, we're going to get back towards the leadership realm, but it's going to be a fun podcast because we're going to talk about a lot of bridges that bridge between what Dave did prior to being in the fire service and where he is now and all the things in between. So as I normally do, I ramble on in the beginning. I'll go ahead and cut it off. And Dave, welcome back to the show. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
All right. So first and foremost, I'm very thankful that you invited me back. I know we kind of touched base a little bit on my history the first time I was on the show, but just like any good story, there's always a lot of context. So for my beginnings, I guess for the important stuff, I'd say that I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, right around the city, and pretty ordinary life for the most part. I'd say the one big thing about me that I tend to bring up when I'm speaking to people that are from our community, when I say community, I mean the fire department community, is that I did not grow up in the fire service per se. A lot of people have. I didn't know anything about the fire service. I would say I was more of a punk kid growing up. I didn't have the greatest influences. I had an older brother who got himself into some trouble, and I kind of looked up to him, and he wasn't always the best influence. So, but one good thing that did come out of my early years was I met at the time, she was my girlfriend. She's now my wife. We've been together for pretty much the entirety of my life. I met her pretty early on, and she kind of had a very similar story with me. Not a lot of guidance in her life. We were both very young. We met right around our early teenage years, and again, you got two kids who are kind of falling head over heels for each other, and they don't have a ton of direction. Things kind of happen, and before I knew it, she was pregnant, and and we didn't have a lot of options. So, initially I didn't really know what to do, so I had actually dropped out of school and decided that I was going to try to work and figure some things out. And, you try that, you do the odd jobs for a bit, but it's pretty apparent that other people that I had seen that had grown up ahead of me, that had gone through similar circumstances, I didn't want that. I didn't want that for me. I didn't want that for my children. We both come from families where multiple marriages, multiple kids, in and out of the picture. It's never healthy for the kids, for the adults, for anybody. So kind of looking at options. I didn't have, parents that had money or could put me through college or point me in the right direction. So something that my brother had a particular interest in before he really started getting into trouble was he wanted to be a Marine. And if you've met me, I'm not the biggest guy. I'm certainly not the most bulky, but my brother, on the other hand, he is. He is one of those guys that could eat pizza all day long and weighs 220 pounds and has pretty much zero body fat. He got all the good genetics, and I got what was left over. So I think growing up looking like that, looking the way that he did, and being around the people that he was around, he kind of naturally gravitated towards the Marine Corps. He met a recruiter. He was really, really, really interested in the whole Marine Corps lifestyle. His father was a Marine, although him and his father weren't exactly close. So, and his father was a Vietnam vet too. We don't know a lot about him, so I can only speak, what I've been told. But once he started getting into trouble, there was some issues that came up with him, and he found out that he was ineligible for enlistment, and that kind of killed it. And I got to thinking, and I'm like, well, the armed forces sounds like a solution. I knew for me personally that the decisions that I was making and the path that I was on, it wasn't working. By this point, my son was born. He was staying at my mother. Well, at the time she wasn't my mother-in-law, but my girlfriend's mother's house. And we had, one bedroom. We were kind of scrambling for food. It wasn't good. So I went and I talked to a recruiter, and I was straight up with him. I was like, I'm not here for the whole patriotism and all that stuff. I'm looking for an out. I got to get the hell out of Baltimore, and I got to take my wife with me. And I was fortunate. I had a really good recruiter, Staff Sergeant Good. He said, all right, it's a lot of people that come to me are in very similar circumstances, and I can certainly help you, but it's not going to be easy. You need to understand what you're getting yourself into. So I knew. I mean, everybody kind of knows, right? We know that it's going to be difficult. We've seen the movies. I know it's not really an accurate description to say, well, it's going to be like the movies. But thankfully with the Marine Corps, it's like you watch Full Metal Jacket, you got a pretty crystal clear picture of what you're going to experience. So a really interesting thing about me is that when you go through the enlistment process, it takes a while. It doesn't happen like on the movies where you walk into a recruiter's office, you sign a contract, and that day you're on a plane. They have to do a background investigation. They have to do some psychological evaluations. You have to take like an intelligence test. You have to get physicals, all that good stuff. So during this process, we had slowly drawn up to September of 2001. And when I went in to sign my contract, my delayed entry contract, which is saying, hey, I'm going to go in. It's going to take a few more months, but I'm going to go in. It was September 10th, 2001. Actually, a really fun fact is years later, my recruiter ended up getting in touch with me, and we tried to find out if I was the last enlistee, so to speak, on September 10th, 2001. What we found out is that obviously its records weren't the greatest back then. There was a lot of people that enlisted on that day, but nonetheless, I didn't enlist post 9/11. I actually enlisted the day before 9/11, and in the interest of honesty, when the next morning came around, and I woke up and I had saw what had happened. I woke up. I was at work. I was delivering doors at the time. But when I saw what had happened, my first thought was, holy shit, what did I get myself into? I thought that because we had been at peace for so long, and I'm not saying I was trying to escape it by any means, but you kind of get this idea of, hey, I'm going to go in. I'm going to do 4 years. The most difficult thing I'm going to deal with is going to be a drill instructor. Once I get past them and I get in my career field, I'm going to be okay. And I was very, very, very adamant that I would get the infantry field. It's just, I grew up a child of the 80s, a child of the 90s. I watched Arnold Schwarzenegger carrying the big tree log in the movie Commando with, Alyssa Milano on his shoulder. And I was like, man, that's awesome. One of my favorite movies was The Rock, and the scene with Ed Harris where his reconnaissance team wipes out those SEALs. It's just, movies like that were enticing to me. And as a young kid, that's where I found my role models because I didn't have a lot of other ones around me. So I called my recruiter up because I really don't know what to think. And naturally, everything's kind of going haywire. And he answered the phone. And I remember he made this comment to me. He said, oh, man, Braun, I'm so glad you called because I've had 4 guys tell me that they're not shipping out, and that was that. But I know that's not you. I know you're my guy. And, of course, my mouth said, oh, yeah, I'm your guy, Staff Sergeant. And in my head, I was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. And it was crazy. So I went home, and another reoccurring theme throughout my story, and I know we kind of touched base on this earlier, is my significant other, who I've been really fortunate with, regardless of the path that I've taken. She's always supported me and more or less been there for me. I think she realized that I was terrified. We didn't know what was going to happen. Of course, in my mind, I went from going and sitting in the barracks to literally leaving the next day. And all I could think of was me on like one of those those loading boats like Saving Private Ryan and rounds hitting the boat and me being the first one to get shot because that's my luck.
Right.
Naturally, it's not like that. But, in your head as a young kid, it's just grappling with, oh, my God, like we're at war. And then the seriousness, the weightiness of the day sort of weighed in, and you see these images on TV and these people just covered in blood and coughing, and it's like the fear and the sadness starts to subside and the anger starts to step in. And I'm trying to psych myself up, and I'm trying to tell myself, like, look, instead of looking at this like, oh my God, this is going to be terrifying, looking at this like you might be given an opportunity to be a literal fist for some of these people who just experienced the worst day that they're ever going to experience. I mean, we had no events like 9/11 prior to 9/11, and I still don't think we've had any post 9/11. So obviously, ultimately, I decided the right thing to do is to go forward with it. I only say this because I've seen people enlist post 9/11, and to me, I look at that and I'm like, man, that is absolutely incredible. I can't imagine having the opportunity and having a choice and still deciding, hey, I'm going to go head first into this. I didn't necessarily have that, so the way I kind of ended up there, it was a little bit of a different walk, so to speak. But I get to boot camp, and obviously boot camp, at least in my mind, I'm sure this is a true statement, but even though I hadn't been to boot camp before, it just seemed like everything had been ramped up to 10. I believe that we were one of the first platoons to go through post 9/11, although they're putting so many platoons through boot camp. It's I think 3 or 4 battalions at a time. Each battalion has like 6 or 8 companies. I'm not sure on the numbers, but for a lot of the drill instructors there, the platoons that we were coming in on, they were the first platoons that were post 9/11. So I'm sure with them, they were like, these kids are going to be going to war. They're going to be boots on the ground in 2 to 3 months. So all of these things that we are teaching and showing them, it needs to be maximized because their life is going to depend on it. And obviously, at the time, it's miserable. I say that the drill instructors that I felt like when they were handing out drill instructors, I got the live grenade. Of course, I get the drill instructor that's like former Force Recon and was just this 5'4" ball of absolute fire. And the very few times that we did get around other platoons and we weren't allowed to talk, and anyone who's been through Marine Corps boot camp, simple conversations, they're very few and frequent. They really make you understand what a lack of freedom is and what it's like to lose all of these things that we take for granted, which was great for me because I needed that. I needed to understand all of the things that I had going into boot camp. All I could think of is, woe is me. I've got a kid. I've got a hard life. I don't have all these opportunities coming out of boot camp. It's like, well, you've got a lot of opportunities. You just don't realize it yet. He was pretty brutal, and I wasn't exactly the strongest kid or the fastest kid. Again, I wasn't an athlete growing up, so I struggled a lot. But thankfully, the Marines, they don't really accept quitting, and I can't, so you kind of learn to push through it. One of the things I do like to brag about is I went into boot camp. I think I was doing maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 pull-ups, and I came out of boot camp and I was doing almost 20. So that's incredible. That's incredible. But if you look at it, you're getting a 3 month physical education camp, so to speak, with a lot more fun activities sprinkled about in between. So
it's like a gym membership, but you get to shoot stuff.
it was, and I'd say, and it really is. It's controlled eating, it's controlled exercise. I learned years later that we joke about things like Marine Corps boot camp, but it's actually such a controlled environment. I mean, everything they do in that 3 months is for a reason. Everything. In the morning, things like when they yell, get online, and everybody runs and gets online, and they do a count off, and all of these numbers, that it all has a purpose. It all has a reason. Everything the Marine Corps does has a reason. The number of belt loops that we have on our uniform has a meaning. The number of buttons, the way that we wear our evil open anchors on our buttons, all of it has a meaning and a purpose. And again, it's things that you don't pick up on right away, but then down the road you realize, hey, the reason why this stuff is so easy for me, for example, getting online and immediate action drill in combat, when you take combat, is everybody kind of spreads out and gets online towards the threat. It's something you've done in boot camp hundreds of times. So instead of worrying about what's on your right and what's on your left and whether or not you're actually getting online and you're focusing on what's on your peripheries, you kind of do it. It's muscle memory. It really hammers home the idea of repetition and doing things over and over, and the basics, the absolute basics. That's all Marine Corps boot camp is. It's the absolute basics in infantry knowledge, in combat knowledge, military knowledge, just continuously hammered into your head.
How long did it take you in boot camp to get, for lack of better words, get with the program, and or did you ever have that, like my drill sergeant is yelling in my face, F that guy, or was it more of okay, I can do this, getting with the program and recognizing that they're going to make you into something that you wanted to be, or maybe you didn't know you wanted to be that, but you were moving towards that direction?
For me, I think it was pretty easy for me. I was actually, easy is a bad word. I think it came a little bit more natural to me, just because of the things for the choices I had at home. I knew I wasn't married, but our plan was to get married immediately after boot camp. I was told by my drill instructor to not show up to boot camp married. And I'm one of these people that if you tell me something, I'm not going to question it, especially when it's something like boot camp or anything for that matter, where I think that the information is, could be the difference between having a miserable time and having a good time. So when he says, hey, listen, don't cut your hair before you go to boot camp, don't show up to boot camp married, I'm like, hey, roger that, we're not getting married. So we decided to push our wedding to post-graduation, post-boot camp. So in my head, I'm like, well, number one, I have to get through boot camp, because otherwise I'm going to be getting married as a failure, as someone who failed boot camp, and that would probably be the saddest wedding ever to exist. And I certainly didn't want to put my wife through it. I also had a child at home. So I had these things in the back of my head where a lot of the, I guess, selfishness behavior of a teenager, it wasn't as pronounced with me as it was some of the other people. A lot of these other people that were in the platoon, they were 18, 19 years old. They all had their reasons for being there. There's a famous saying that people that end up in professions like ours, they're either trying to prove something or they're running away from something. I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true. I think you get people that are just, they have a history where they're always trying to meet or exceed these goals. And then I think you have these other people where they've just been stepped on all their life and they've got a lot to show and just an opportunity. And it's like, well, this is a really extreme way for me to get that opportunity. So one of the first good examples of that was in boot camp. Something they make you do is the first couple times you eat chow, you got to chew by the numbers. And it sounds ridiculous, and it's funny, and I'm sure it looks funny. So you go into the chow hall, and you pick out your food, and in your mind, you're trying to make a decision, and the reality of it is the decision doesn't matter because you're not going to get to eat it. It's just setting yourself up for failure. And then you sit down. Again, it's all controlled, but you start to eat your food. They tell you to stop. They tell you to everybody to put the fork up to their mouth, take a bite, to chew. And you're literally chewing while this drill instructor says, chew, 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 and then eventually tells you to spit it out. And I just could not fathom somebody telling me when he said spit it out, in my head, I'm like, of course he doesn't mean spit it out because I haven't swallowed it yet. Like, why would he tell me to spit out my food? I'm hungry. I haven't swallowed it yet. So I swallowed. And these DIs, I'm pretty sure the way they pick them out is they pick the ones that have like almost superhuman vision because they see everything. Of course, they spotted me. I get surrounded. It's three DIs just taking turns, just hammering me left and right, and I'm getting food dumped on me. I'm doing push-ups. I'm just in my head. I'm like, this is hell. Like I've died and gone to hell. And then it just kind of stops, and they move on to the next recruit. And to me, it was almost like, okay, well, from here on out, everything they tell me to do, I'm going to be as literal as I can be. We actually, on the obstacle course, this actually made them laugh. We have a rope that we have to climb at the end, and when you climb the rope, they teach you a technique on climbing the rope. It's a really functional technique, which I'm sure you've done before. Obviously, we learned it in the fire department too. But where you wrap your leg around the rope, takes all your weight off the rope, and then you ascend. And I think the biggest thing is the fear of height. They're trying to get you comfortable with, being in an elevated position and being in control of it. So there's a bell that you ring, and they tell you to let go and ring the bell. And when they told me to let go and ring the bell, I literally let go of the rope with both hands. And I thankfully, when I flipped upside down, my foot wrapped up in the rope and acted as a safety. But then I was kind of suspended there, and a recruit suspended upside down with a bunch of DIs isn't a good thing. But, in my head, I'm like, well, they told me to let go, so I let go. And I remember at one point, one of the DIs actually, in a very violent manner, said that. He's like, well, at least you're, stupid ass let go. And I'm like, well, yeah, I learned my lesson the first time. I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. It's just that it's breaking that. They say break you down, and I've seen, obviously, teaching up at our academy, I've seen where we get these young people who are in an environment they've never been in before, and you have to get them to execute very, very, very specific directions. And it's for their benefit. It's so that we can get whatever it is we need to get done, because as you well know, we never have enough time to do a proper academy. I'm sure boot camp, I wasn't a drill instructor, but I've got plenty of friends who were, and it's the same thing. It's like we have this limited amount of time to cram all this information down your throat, and we're doing it to discipline you, but we're also doing it to maximize the efficiency of this operation. So I think that for a lot of people, it's that attitude where they just never had somebody really talk to them and break them down like that. And for me, I didn't care. It wasn't as big of a deal. But I would imagine that if I didn't have a wife or a future wife at home or a kid at home, it probably would have been a much, much bigger deal to me. So I know that's kind of a long answer, but I think that's why I might have, as far as the program, so to speak, might have adapted a little bit easier. I think it was just that maturity level.
So
it was a little bit.
As you're moving through boot camp, obviously you have an idea, I'm assuming, of what you wanted to do. Did you end up doing what you wanted to do, or did they pick you for something else? How did you ultimately end up in the MOS that you carried throughout your military career before you left?
So when I enlisted, I told my recruiter that I wanted to do infantry. I told him flat out, I said I would not leave for boot camp unless I got selected for infantry. I'd actually been sent down to MEPS a couple of times, because you always hear the story of the ones who didn't want to go infantry and get to boot camp and get picked for infantry. That was not me. If there was one thing I was certain of, it was that I belonged in the infantry. I can't really explain it. I think that I knew, because then a lot of people are like, well, why didn't you try to become, like a Navy SEAL or something? It's like, okay, well, I wouldn't have made it if I tried, number one. But I think it was a more realistic goal for me. And I knew that is why, other than the life situation, that was what was drawing me to the Marines. Is, yes, it was a matter of my circumstance and where I was in life and everything else that I was seeking this change. But I also knew, like, hey, I like the idea of going out in the woods and putting face paint on and carrying a pack and and walking. I actually, when we first got issued our rifles, that was, and mind you, I had not grown up around rifles. I had never even seen one before. So the first time that I got issued a rifle in boot camp, that was a high point for me. I was like, this is awesome. This is an M16. This is just like I saw on the movies, and they just handed this thing to me, and I couldn't get enough of it. I was all in on the infantry. So because I had a good recruiter, my recruiter, believe it or not, did not want me to go infantry. Now, I think that when I came in and I spoke with him, I think that he was probably looking at it like there's this young kid. He's obviously got a lot going on, and I don't want to send him to boot camp and put him out in the fleet and just have him, because if your family life's not good, you're no good to the Marine Corps. So, I mean, for the most part, they try to take care of you just because it's going to make you a more efficient warrior, so to speak. But he wanted me to be a truck driver. At the time, I was delivering doors, and I think I had mentioned him one time, hey, I like driving. I like driving big trucks. And I guess he kind of took that as, well, I'm going to try and push him towards what we call motor T. I had gone down to MEPS a couple times, and when they put the contract in front of me, I saw that it had some other MOS than infantry, and that was where I would draw my line. And I'm like, I'm not signing this. I will not sign this. And on Thanksgiving Day, November 25th, 2001, I go down there. I remember at this point we had done it so many times. I mean, we're talking, 2 months now of almost every weekend going down and thinking I'm going to leave for boot camp and saying my goodbyes. And I think people started thinking, oh, that Braun, he's not going anywhere. He's just, he's just pretending. And so November 25th, Thanksgiving, I go down, and the recruiter tells me ahead of time, he's like, I'll be honest, I don't think you're going to ship just because they're not going to want to put you up in a hotel that night. They're probably going to send you back. I go down, and I will never forget this guy's face. I go in this staff sergeant's office, and he's got K-bars, which are knives. They're very popular. Just a big Rambo knife, essentially, all over his office with stuff etched in, all these units that he served with, and he's got these. So immediately I knew, like, okay, this guy, he's an infantry Marine. And he comes in and he slams the papers down on the desk, looks at me square in the eye and says, Braun, are you, I won't say the word he said, but are you chickening out on me? And I'm like, what do you mean, Staff Sergeant? And he's like, you've been down this facility, I don't know how many times, and you have yet to leave. And I tell him, Staff Sergeant, all I want is infantry option. And he laughs. And this should have been my first sign I was in trouble. He laughs. And he's like, so let me get this straight. He's like, you want to go in the infantry? And I'm like, yep. And he's like, wait right here. And 5 minutes later, he comes in. He's like, okay, this is called infantry option. This literally means that you're going to get to pick your MOS once you get to School of Infantry. There's no tricks involved or anything like that. You're going to go to School of Infantry. They'll tell you about all these career opportunities. You can pick what you want. If you want to be a rifleman, you can be a rifleman. If you want to be a machine gunner, you can be a machine gunner. You ready to leave? And I'm yes, sir, let's go. And I signed the contract, and that was it. And I know kind of where you're getting with that is ultimately one of my later MOSs, which is 8541. It's the Scout Sniper designation. Where did I get that from?
Right, and that's and I think a lot of the people that are going to listen to this, and when they go like, well, I know Dave, and I know he just wasn't going out there, walking point or something, because he ended up being this this Marine Scout sniper, so he must have like this high IQ, or he's got a good eye, or he's great at gathering intelligence, and which is all true. I mean, in order to pass the school that you went through, you had to have all of that, and I want to hear about. And it's something that I know you're proud of, because, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago for like an hour on the phone. I know you're proud of that. So I want you to tell the people, how you ultimately got to where you are, how difficult it was to go through this, and what it means to actually wear that patch. You know what I mean? And I think that's what the people that are here, they want to hear, how did you do that? It's like, I know you didn't become a SEAL. And just for the record, to go back to what you talked about earlier, yeah, you watched the movie The Rock, but you didn't go into the Marines just to shoot SEALs. That was just part of the movie.
I
So,
didn't want to. Actually, I got nothing but love. Those guys are. I was really fortunate. We worked a lot with them, and they are the attention they get. I can unequivocally say they deserve every bit of it.
yeah,
Some of the most.
one of the guys that's been on my show a couple of times. He's a retired Navy SEAL, and that he says the same thing. Nothing but love for the Marines. You guys are the hardest working people out there, and to be attached with them, and just how seamless it was. A great group of people. But let's move on to you got your infantry. You probably you're ready to ship out, and the only thing holding you back is because they wouldn't give you infantry. And obviously, this staff sergeant recognized that right away. And you got your MOS to be infantry. So who or how did you decide that I'm going to go do that the Marine Scout Sniper School?
So the way that it's done in the Marine Corps, it's a lot of myth around it. So I get to the boot camp. I go to what we call the School of Infantry. Now, this isn't an option in the School of Infantry. This is one of the more, at the time, actually, they required you to have a deployment before you could even consider it. And I'll get into kind of the thought process behind that. I don't think it's a good thing, but so I get to the School of Infantry. What actually at the time, what excited me was rifleman. I was like, I like the idea of being a rifleman, just going out on patrol and just regular infantry stuff out of the options. And the options, you can be a rifleman, you can be a machine gunner, you can be what we call a tow gunner, which is like a heavy missile. It's a tube launch, optically guided. It's basically a gigantic, very expensive missile that's usually mounted on top of like a Humvee. We've got assault men who are like they're the portable anti-armor guys. We've got mortars. Actually, I was kind of back and forth between mortars and riflemen. I really like the idea of mortars just because I don't know, it seemed really cool to me, like mobile artillery, so to speak. But so I become a rifleman, and I go to 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marine. Actually, first I got assigned to 1st Battalion, 2nd Marine. Then I go to 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marine. And I get assigned to a squad, and when I say I hit the jackpot when it came to a team leader and a squad leader, I mean I hit the jackpot. The Marine Corps infantry is a lot like I don't know. People compare it to almost like a prison, so to speak. In that it's a lot of really, really, really wild individuals that kind of get stuck together under the same roof, and it makes for a really chaotic environment. So I was really fortunate that the squad leader and the team leader that I got two of the most mature, intelligent, just very, very, very humble, absolutely lethal individuals. As a matter of fact, one of them is a fireman now, Sergeant A.J. Miller, in Spokane, Washington, kind of a cool turn of events. But I got really lucky, and I got a really good squad leader. So at first, I had absolutely no desire to do anything other than standard infantry field work. As a matter of fact, my first 2 deployments that I went on, I was just a rifleman, and I liked it. There were opportunities that in the Marine Corps, so once you do your job for a little bit and you get a deployment under you, a lot of these secondary platoons will start holding screeners or indocs, and you can apply to them, and you can go and you can take the indoc, and if you qualify for the indoc, you can then move on to the platoon and kind of go from there. So my second deployment, one of the chief scouts of what we call at the time State Platoon was a guy named Dave Turner, and I had met him, and he ended up getting attached to our platoon, and me and him kind of hit it off. And prior to that, I really didn't have a lot of opinions about the sniper platoon. I didn't know like what it consisted of or what they did. And then I met him, and I got really excited because they just sold it as, look, It's an organization. It's a opportunity where a bunch of guys who are really good at their job, who really enjoy what they do, they're all kind of under the same roof, and it's an extension of the infantry. It's so when you go through this school in the Marine Corps, they call it a B billet. It's not your primary MOS, and actually, most people, when they say that they did this job, they say it almost sort of like how in the fire department, how you say, well, I'm a rescue squad driver, or I'm a special team guy. It's something that you do for a short window just because there's other more, I guess, important leadership billets in the Marine Corps, and since retention's so low, they don't have a lot of space for you. So the Scout Sniper Platoon, it's an extension of the battalion commander, more or less his eyes and ears. So when you think of an infantry battalion, you have a couple of companies consisting of Marine Corps rifle platoons, and each platoon has a couple of squads, and it's basically these taskable units that go out and do infantry stuff. And then you also have these supplemental units. You have things like weapons company and weapons platoon, which consists of your machine gunners, your mortarman, your assaultman, so on and so forth. So every battalion in the Marine Corps does it different. Each battalion's kind of given carte blanche with how they want to employ and use their own sniper platoons. Some of them, the sniper platoons, are a part of headquarters company just because they answer directly to the battalion commander, to the leadership. Other battalions, some of them keep them in weapons companies because they think of the sniper as a weapon. Personally, I think it's more of an intelligence asset, so I think it makes more sense to be in a headquarters company, but you could get in arguments with people who are in this community night and day, and everybody's got their own reasons. So Dave, I had expressed an interest to Dave, and Dave at the time, he was one of the chief scouts in this platoon, and he was like, okay, he's like, so what do you want to know? And I asked him about the INDOC. One of the things that I think kind of turns a lot of people off with this INDOC is they make you wait 2 years before you take the INDOC. So at this point, a lot of people have already been with their teams and their squads for 2 years. Most people that roll through the Marine Corps, they're only there for 4 years, and then they leave. Of those 4 years, the first year and a half is training. The last 6 months or 3 months, however long it takes, is checking out. So it's a really, really small window. So when you have somebody that is in a rifle platoon and is a team leader now or a squad leader now, they're not exactly excited about the opportunity of starting all over at the bottom. Very similar in the fire department, right? It's no different when some of these guys, they stay at these houses without a lot of specialty pieces, and it's because they're in a leadership build and they like where they're at. Other people are like, no, I want more. So I had spoken with Dave, and I got in the lowdown on the INDOC, and I decided that I was going to take a shot at the INDOC, and so I ended up taking the INDOC, and there was a couple of us that got through the INDOC, and from the INDOC, what you do is you drop to a platoon, and you're what's called a PIG, which is basically someone who has not gone through the school yet. You're waiting for your spot to open up. Now, the school is notoriously difficult, so it's not unheard of for people to attempt the school 2 or 3 times to get a pass. And as I said, it's a lot of crunch time, so to speak, just because they don't have that long in the platoon to begin with unless they're re-enlisting. So it's kind of this revolving door, right? But the people that I knew and the individual that I knew, he is one of the most respected, or at least I believe he's one of the most respected names in the community. He was there for a very long time. He had actually skipped over a couple of promotions just to stay with the state platoon. So when it comes to people knowing what they're supposed to be doing and knowing what it takes and knowing what to look for, this guy was it. Couple that with my old squad leader, who he was one of those people that if I went up and I said, hey, I'm considering leaving your platoon, his first thing wasn't, oh, why are you leaving me? His first response was, what can I do to help you get where you want to get? So again, being surrounded by these incredible people, I was on ship actually on our way back, and we would go down, we would work out. They would talk to me about some of the things that were part of the INDOC, some of the field exercises. Very, very, more or less, it's one of those where they're going to take you somewhere for a week or 2 weeks at a time. They're just going to make you suffer for a little bit. And they want to make sure that you're not going to give up, that you're not going to quit, right? They don't want to waste time on you. because if you get in a platoon and you have an attitude or you have a chip on your shoulder, you're not going to do what's required of you, right? And a pig in a platoon, he has a responsibility, the radio or assisting the team leader, right? Because the team leader has the gun. So if you're just going in there because of a name, because you want that name sniper attached on your resume or the MOS designator, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to do what's required of you. So you really got to be excited about the actual job itself. And I was excited about the job itself. I wasn't so much excited about the shooting and the ghillie suit as I was the intelligence gathering. I sat in a briefing on one of my deployments with Dave, and I remember there was a part in this briefing where they were asking him some questions about some individuals that he saw out in a village. And I mean, the way this guy described these individuals head to toe, I mean, he was just about as exact as could be. And you couldn't help but stand there and be impressed. And naturally, you see someone like that, and you're like, man, I want to be like that. I want to do what that guy does.
They say that, the things that I've heard about people that have gone through the sniper school, it's not all about taking the shot. It's more of, like you said, gathering that intelligence. You spend 90% of your time observing your surroundings and gathering that intelligence and sending that back to the battalion commander so they have an idea of what they might be in for. It's not about, going out finding that one guy and, one shot, one kill, and then go back, and drink a beer or something like that. It's a lot of infield, in country or whatever you want to call it, of just gathering intelligence and taking that information back. Is that accurate?
So it's absolutely accurate. As a matter of fact, some of the terms that we like to use is continuous, all day, all weather observed. It's so. Again, you are an extension of the infantry, and you have to think of the infantry's mission set, right? So a lot of times our mission gets kind of crossed with that of special operations. So again, my military career, this is a reoccurring theme with me, is I always seem to find myself in the right place at the right time. And on one of our deployments, we were essentially attached to a SEAL team, members of a SEAL team. A lot of these guys were stretched really thin, and they didn't want to put their own guys on Overwatch just because there were so few of them in their designated bases or their AOs that it was easier for them to grab a Marine sniper and put him in that role. Since we operate interchangeably with the SEALs, and it's almost a relationship kind of like how the Rangers are to Delta, although we're not Rangers, but again, it's a supplemental role. So working with those guys, and you're talking about people who are, the apex of training, the apex of funding, and rightfully so, they've earned it. It's a different, and a lot of people have come to me and inquired about this job. There's a difference between a special operations sniper and an infantry sniper, right? A special operations sniper, that's a lot of the really, really glorious stuff you see on TV, whereas the infantry, you're always going to be in support of that infantry company, of that infantry battalion. So primarily, you're an intelligence gatherer. That's your specialty. You are able to punch out further in front of the battalion. You're able to sit at a select position for an extended period of time in small numbers and gather really, really detailed intelligence. And when I say detailed, so without getting too much into the specifics of the school, it's almost like it's 3 phases, right? And it's like at the time, and it's changed quite a lot, and now there's a pre-sniper school that candidates go through, which is a good thing, just because so many people fail the school. And a lot of times it's not because they're quitting, it's just because they're off on their academics, or they're off on a point on their shooting package, and it's something small that, again, if they go back to their unit and they train a little bit more, they come back, they're more likely to pass. So it's just it's a very, 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 very difficult school to get through. I would have never gotten through it in the opportunity that I did without the people above me who were above me talking to me and helping me out and just really putting all their time and energy into me. For each phase of that school, I was wholly prepared. Land navigation is a notoriously difficult portion of that school, and I was actually pretty comfortable with land nav. I was good at that. Something I was not as good at versus a lot of the other candidates was the physical aspect. So in my squad, in my platoon, you've met me. I'm kind of skinny. I'm kind of lanky. I'm light on my feet, and that's the ideal Marine. We're not bulky. We're not huge like a lot of these, Green Berets, SF guys. If the ideal Marine is an underfed, skinny individual who's light on his feet, and that was me in a nutshell. And in my platoon and in my team, I was in pretty good fitness. And then I found out very quickly once I got over to this platoon that I was comparable to them. I was nowhere near where some of these guys are. And you have to think, you're now dealing with the top 10% of each company, right? That's why they hold this indoc. You're not up against the entirety of the battalion. You're up against the top 10% physically of the battalion. So it's where I found myself struggling more often than not was the physical side of things. But again, I made up for it. A lot of people, I don't want to say they don't take it as seriously, but they can be their own worst enemy. If they're given off for the weekend, they go out instead of studying, they go out and they start drinking, and they start doing something that isn't conducive to them graduating. And you don't get a lot of time off just because the school is relatively short, but these are things that I saw personally in 2004. So my class was, everyone will know their class number. My class was 3 TAC 2, and it was one of the first classes of the year. So a lot of the people that we had in the class, they were rollovers from the previous year, so they had already been through it once. And I don't want to say that the ones who didn't graduate didn't want it bad enough, but it truly is one of these schools where if you want it bad enough, you're going to get it. It's how much you're willing to give up. And it's I know that's kind of a very, very basic way to put it, and people want a secret, but it really is. The shooting package, it tends to hem people up, but shooting has become such a small part of the sniper's mission set. Now, mind you, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, those were very unique environments. The guerrilla force that we were facing, the untrained opposition, the tactics that they used, IEDs, it was a sniper's place. But most battlefields aren't going to be like that. It's more of a risk of compromising yourself when you do take a shot. So again, it just goes back to that primary mindset of intelligence gathering. I like that. I like being in the platoon. I thought I was going to stay. I thought that for me, once I got to the school and I graduated the school and I held the MOS, to me, I was like, well, I'm set. I've got an amazing BMOS, so I can pretty much write my own ticket as far as opportunities go. I'm going to finish out my career in here, and I'm just going to, spend it in the infantry. And for all intents and purposes, I was considered a careerist. I had every intention of staying in. That's you got to think. I mean, I did more than one enlistment, and that was wasn't because I was so excited about the deployment tempo at the time. It's because I was excited about just being a Marine and being in the infantry and moving up the chain. But yeah, so to wrap up your question, it's So as you get to an infantry battalion now, right off the bat, you're given the opportunity to take the indoc. You take the indoc, you get into a platoon, you spend your time as a pig. When your number comes up, you go to the school. Depending on your standing in the platoon and how bad they want you as a team leader, will determine whether or not, if you fail, you go to the school again and again and again until you eventually get through it, or until you EAS, which is run out of time. Once you get through the school, you become a team leader, which means you get your own gun. You're considered a hog or a hunter of gunmen, and there's a lot that comes with that. In every scout sniper hut, there's a door that will say hogs only, and you do not go in that door until you graduate that school and get that MOS. And if you do go in that door without doing that, you're going to be in for a very bad day. Traditions are very, very, very paramount in that platoon, just because it's kind of big boy rules over there. You're kind of, once you get over there, you've got the things that you need to get done, but you're considered to be a much more mature individual in platoons like that. So you're left to your own devices. You're expected to be in top physical shape. It's very easy. If you don't meet that standard, they kick you out. And they don't need a lot to kick you out. To get you in, you pretty much have to get a unanimous vote, and there is no explanation on, hey, person A didn't vote me in or person B didn't vote me in. It's either you impress everybody in the platoon or you don't get in. For my own situation, there was one individual who was on leave when I took the indoc, and I don't think, since I wasn't the biggest guy, I don't think he was kind of a big dude, and I think he kind of identified with big dudes, and I wasn't the biggest, so I think that might be, or maybe I just sucked, I don't know, but he was kind of a holdout on me, and I had to go and talk to him and humble myself, and I mean, he humbled me real quickly, but ultimately it got me in the platoon. So, yeah, I didn't go in with a clear-cut course to that platoon. It wasn't until I met somebody else and they introduced me to it, and I thought, man, this is cool. This is infantry. This is a specialized skill set. This is something that I really like to do. It's in an environment where I get to do it, and other guys in this job get to do it, and it's cool. And I really want to push myself, and I really want to try and get this opportunity, and I did.
So once you graduated, and like you said, you went from a pig to a hog, and you graduated, you get into your platoon, and you get deployed, and you went over to Afghanistan, correct?
So, no, we went to Iraq.
Iraq, okay. So that was your first deployment as a scout sniper, correct?
Yes.
And so did you run into anything over there? Anything significant happened over there? Because I know you deployed more than once as a sniper.
Yes. Yes. I stuck around, went down to SOTG, and then did a second deployment down with them. I actually have to what we call TAD out to another unit. So I know the story you're referring to, but
well, I think, and before we get to that, I know, I like to keep these podcasts at an hour, but we're going to go over that because I think it's interesting of, the decisions that you had to make. Everybody that I've talked to that has had a really pleasurable experience in the military always say that they, were just on the other side of just really good luck. And how just things kind of fell in place, right time, and all that. And I think, I know that a lot of that happened to you, and you made mention of that. But you get deployed to Iraq, with your platoon, and I know it's a tight knit group. You've talked about that quite a bit. But so your deployments that you went through. Let's touch on some of the stuff that you did on your deployment. Some of the lessons that you learned. That shaped you to, the person that you were in the Marines, and then when you ultimately left and then joined in the fire service. But let's talk about your first deployment to Iraq.
So my first deployment, so actually Iraq wasn't even on the horizon. We ended up in Iraq, but my first deployment, I was a rifleman. We had gone on what we call a MEU. I was a part of the 24th MEU, and at the time, Operation, I think it was Anaconda, had already happened, where they put the SF in AG, and there was a pretty constant presence with that. But there wasn't a whole lot going on. So originally, our mission set was we were supposed to go to Kosovo. Kosovo was the site of this joint military operation where, infantry units and the such from all over the world were kind of working to protect the border between Kosovo and Yugoslavia. And so we, in our minds, right, because of everything that happened with 9/11, like in our minds, we are treating Kosovo like we are going to put our foot on the ground and we are just going to encounter, hell. That there's just going to be this enemy presence there, this insurmountable enemy presence, and it's just, and I honestly, I wonder if every deployment in the Marine Corps prior to that was very, very similar. So the Marine Corps as a whole, the way they deploy is not normal. So we go out on these ships, And the reason we exist at all is we are this entity that can be somewhere very, very, very rapidly and do things, limited things, right? Broader than, say, an SF unit, but a little bit more rapid than a standard Army infantry. So for the Marine Corps infantry, there's a term that goes under every new deployment, and it stands special operations capable. And all that means is that this infantry unit can do more than a regular infantry unit. So the idea is we go out, we sit in these strategic positions in the world on ships, and if something happens, an embassy gets overrun, some major turning point event, we are there. We can be deployed immediately, and then in between all of this, they try to set up training opportunities with some of these host nations. So Kosovo was one of the operations that it was a common thing. There's actually a couple other guys that worked for our department that were Marines that were in prior to 9/11 that had been to Kosovo, had been to the same base that I'd been to. So we get to this base, and we get our mission. We're going to go out. We're going to patrol. We're going to try to protect these borders and keep people from crossing these borders. And the picture that's painted for us, and I don't know a lot about the politics of Kosovo, was obviously in the I think it was the late 80s, early 90s, the whole genocide thing that was going on over there. Well, that was still very, very Kosovo was it's such an amazing place, and I'm not going to do it justice by describing it, but it's these just beautiful mountains, and you go down these mountains, and they all kind of intersect into these little villages. And I mean, these villages, they look like something out of medieval time, and it's just it's incredible. So we start getting out into our AO, our area of operations, and we start meeting a lot of the locals, and we talk to them, and we kind of come to the conclusion that I don't really know if the picture that was being painted to us is true. So we start to find people in the morning that are coming across the border, and the first one we see, I mean, we are like ramped up to a 10, rifles raised, running up on in tactical style. Everybody's in position, flex cuffs out. Got a little translator card out and everything, and the guy's got like a bag full of rotten fruit and a couple of broken hammers. And we find out that most of these people are just looking for work. They're trying to get across the border. They're looking for work. They're really not presenting a danger. So our platoon sort of makes this collective decision of, okay, we're not going to be sticking weapons in these people's faces. It just didn't feel right. We just knew something was off, and again, it's the Marines might not really be the best the best unit for this mission, but we've been given it, so we're going to do with it what we can. So what we did, we started, going down in the villages and like really becoming friendly with the locals, and they kind of guided us on, okay, these people are coming across the border because they're looking for work. These people are coming across the border because they're political refugees. And it kind of, it shifted the whole, I guess you could say, mission from what the command had for us. And it was my first lesson on that is what you are being told and what you are being directed you are going to encounter is never, ever what you are going to encounter. So we go from that. We're there for about 2 months, and then the SEALs, there's some SEALs in Djibouti, and they're not supposed to be there. This was like a very low-key thing at the time, but we get noticed that we're going to go and we're going to task up with the SEALs and basically be their security. And I mean, we are just about as elated as can be, because we're like, oh, that's great, because this was cool and all, but this isn't really Marine work. Really like the pictures, but I want to go do Marine stuff. And again, it was one of those things where we get out there and their hands were so tied. I mean, there was a very, very, very heavy presence in Africa. Obviously, Boko Haram, if I'm pronouncing it right, was a sort of up and coming, but there were a lot of cells out there. There's always been an SF presence in that part of Africa, in Djibouti, or what they call the Lower Horn, so that could kind of should kind of speak for itself. But we would go out, we would find these groups doing this stuff, and it was almost just like how it was in the movies. They would have these UN groups that would bring them food and bring the locals aid and stuff like that. And we would go out, we would see these trucks, these Toyotas fly by us with these very, very, very nasty looking dudes with AKs, and they would just ransack the place. And it was very like, hey, don't you dare interfere. And it wasn't just, don't be a hero. Like, if you interfere, you're going to kickstart an international incident. So you are to do nothing. And it kind of became disheartening really quickly, because it's like, well, all we're doing is we're sitting here watching bad people do bad things. And there's not, we tried, That's really when I started to appreciate the SEALs and what they have to do and what they're being asked to do and how they got to kind of, circumvent certain channels. But we tried. We did what we could, but still, no Iraq on the horizon. There were mumblings about weapons of mass destruction, but we didn't hear anything about that. And as far as we were concerned, even if there was something that was going to pop off, we had already been out to sea for a couple of months, so most of our stuff was broken, so we probably weren't going to be a part of it. I remember, sitting there thinking, like, I'm going to be the one Marine when everybody else goes to war. I'm going to come home and say, well, I didn't get to go to war. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. So we go to Egypt. There was an embassy takedown in Egypt, and I'm not that it's like secret or anything, but a lot of times the specifics around those, they're really iffy about that. But it's a well-known thing. It was 2002, 2003 time frame. Anyone that wants to look it up could look it up. But we just had some American citizens in an embassy that we had to go in and evacuate. That was pretty cool, but it was a very short-lived experience. And then we go back on our ship and we find out that we're going back to Africa and we're getting extended. So we were supposed to be heading home, and they say, no, you're not going to go home. You're going to stick around in Africa for a couple more months. And again, it's cool because the SEALs, they tried their best with us. They would take us out and their training ops, and they got the best toys and stuff like that. So, but again, it's the mission we were being asked to do. It was miserable. It was miserable. And you start to think, like, is this what it is? Like, we see what we want it to be on TV, but is this really what I'm going to be doing? Is just watching people who are quite literally helpless just get stepped on, and it doesn't matter what the reasoning is. It doesn't matter what happened before. This should not be happening. So now word starts coming down that there's going to be a whole bunch of Marine units staging in Kuwait. And I just start hearing all these units, 1, 2, 3, 2, all these task force designations, task force Tarla and the such. And you start hearing like actual concept of ops and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to be the only ones that aren't a part of it. And so at this point, we're back out on ship. We've actually been on the longest Marine Corps deployment since the Vietnam War. Normally, the Marine Corps deploys for 6 months. We had been gone for almost a year now. So we're thinking, man, there's no way we are going into Iraq. And then 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll never forget, a ship bell goes off, and all of a sudden people start running into the berthing area saying we're offloading the Marines. They're going to Kuwait, and that's all we know. So now it's like, oh shit, like we're going. we're going to be a part of this. So we offload, and the USS Tortuga, I'm going to mention this for just 1 second. There was a command master chief on this ship, and he said, he spoke to all the Marines before they left. He said, if God is my witness, this ship will bring you home. We are not going to leave until every one of you comes out of Iraq. And at the time, you're like, yeah, whatever, but he kept true to his promise. We could have flown home, but we decided to take his ship back because he waited for us. That was cool. That was, I can't imagine how many strings he had to pull to make that happen. But we get to Kuwait, and it is like everything that I had known about the Marine Corps and everything I thought I knew about how the Marine Corps operated went out the door. we went from this very, 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 everything's accounted for, every round is accounted for, every piece of equipment is accounted for, to literally just, okay, who needs MBGs? Who needs more ammo? Who needs this? Who needs that? Here's your vehicles. By the way, your vehicles don't have doors, so it's a good thing. If someone shoots you, at least the bullet will hit you and won't split up. And again, it doesn't really make sense, but we tried to justify this stuff, any way we could. But
now, Dave, before you go any further, so we've been at this for about an hour and 4 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop right here. We're going to make this a 2-part show. So
okay.
What I'm going to do is you just got into Iraq, and then when we're going to pick up this as part 2, we're going to talk about now that you're deployed to Iraq, and then we're going to move forward from there and how your deployments went and some of the things that you got into there, and then we'll ultimately transition into the fire service. So I'm going to get you in for a part 2 on this show if you're good with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can shorten it, but there's a
nope.
So
I don't want to shorten it because there's such good stuff that you've gone through that shaped you to who you are. The things that you learned along the way, that I think it's important that that you tell your story, and I want your story. I want your story out there because it's a really cool story. So we're going to pick up on part 2 where we just get into Iraq, and then we're going to move forward from there. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. Yeah, that's perfect.
All right, so this show will split up between April and May. So without going any further than that, we're going to sign off, and then we're going to go ahead and we'll pick this back up, and then it'll be part 2 of the show. Does that sound good?
Yes, sir.
All right, so it's been good talking to you so far. So we're going to pick up with part 2. So remember where we left off, and we'll go from there, all right?
Copy that.
All right, take it easy.
All right, sir.
Bye.